So the chip war is getting nastier. Now Trump is gambling everything on the tech sector. It's AI and semiconductors that is the future of the United States. The machines are coming. Now it's pretty hilarious when you think about it. This is the chain of events. Biden cuts chips to the world. Trump cuts more chips to China. Then China decides to ban all US chips to their government funded data centers. And now the saga continues. This is so bizarre, I have no words for it. The hunt for Chinese revenue is getting more and more desperate. Now, Trump is now moving to hold high level talks with Beijing to decide if Nvidia can sell more advanced chips to China. But didn't China really decide to ban all American chips coming in? So, which is it? I'm really getting lost in the sauce. If you hold Nvidia stock, this is going to be exciting for you. Now, if China decides to allow this, then the stock should fly even higher. But if they don't, then expect a very painful correction. It's a sign that China has really walked away from US chip imports, and the evidence is really starting to show that that's the case. Now, back in September, Huawei committed to double their output of AI chips in China. Now, Capricorn is moving to do the exact same thing. The Chinese chip company is moving to triple their production of AI chips next year. They will be competing with Huawei by delivering over 500,000 AI accelerators in 2026. But make no mistake, the main agenda here is to flood China with Chinese AI chips. And whether it's Huawei or Capricorn, it really doesn't matter. The plan is to start making Chinese tech companies reliant on local chips. Just like how Nvidia wants the world to build their tech stack on its semiconductors, China wants the same as well. If Chinese companies use chips long enough, even if the West comes in one day, breaking away will be costly. It's going to be very, very inconvenient. Now, there's also another benefit for China to accelerate their chip production. Huawei and Capricorn chips are made by SMIC, and that's the Chinese equivalent of TSMC in Taiwan and the US. Now, Huawei is making their Ascend 910 chips there, while Capricorn is using SMIC's latest 7 nanometer production process. So, China is firing on all cylinders. Not only are the chip designers going to benefit, not only will Chinese tech firms buy more for less, the entire ecosystem is going to grow together, including the chip maker. Which means if one day TSMC refuses to help China or any other country make chips, SMIC can step in. It's not a crisis today, but it can be a real possibility tomorrow. And here's the scary thing. Capricorn, despite low margins, they have turned profitable in 2025. This is a mixture of domestic demand and Chinese government subsidies. Financially speaking, this means they can fight sustainably with US chip makers. They aren't suffering a loss. The entire Chinese ecosystem is allowing them to fight on indefinitely. Now, China has so many avenues to bypass US sanctions. In fact, they kind of welcome it. It's the fastest way to build your own chip ecosystem. You burn the boats, and there's no option left but to succeed. And that seems to be the Chinese and Russian model today. Even now, Chinese tech giants are still developing their AI models without delay. The economy is global, and there are too many avenues for China to access US chips if they really want to. Chinese tech giants are taking their AI model training overseas. In other words, Chinese AI models are using data centers in Southeast Asia, and this includes Singapore and Malaysia. Best of all, it is in compliance with US export controls. As a result of this, Chinese AI models are still advancing ahead. So we have two parallel developments in China. On one hand, Chinese AI is getting better and better. On the other hand, the physical chips for AI development are also getting better. And this is being done sustainably despite heavy US sanctions. The export controls simply aren't working. Now, Alibaba's Qwen and ByteDance models are now the top performing LLMs worldwide. Qwen in particular is an open source model that global companies and developers use. As a result, this spillover of training is benefiting countries like Singapore and Malaysia. Chinese companies sign lease agreements to use overseas data centers. Now, there's no way to squeeze this out because Chinese companies will always find a way. Nvidia also can't afford any revenue squeeze. they need to justify all these crazy valuations as well. Now, Jensen truly understands the big advantage China has. The entire ecosystem today is set up to accelerate two things: tech innovation and industrial manufacturing. And it creates a virtuous loop that is self reinforcing. And that's why Washington is handicapped in this area. The US economy just doesn't have a competitive industrial manufacturing base, and without it, costs will get elevated.
Infrastructure. If you want to build a data center here in the United States, from breaking ground to standing up a AI supercomputer is probably about 3 years. They can build a hospital in a weekend. That's a real challenge. And so at the infrastructure layer, their velocity of building things, because they are builders, their velocity of building things is extraordinarily high. Really quickly on chips, we're several generations ahead, but don't be complacent. Remember, semiconductors is a manufacturing process. Anybody who thinks China can't manufacture is missing a big idea.
Now, the chip war is going to get more brutal. The US themselves also have an operating expense issue. Now, to run data centers, you obviously need lots of power. Not just accessible power, but affordable and cheap energy. Now, according to Pew Research, data centers today accounts for 4% of total power demand in the US in 2024. And this number is going to double by 2030, and let that sink in. By the end of the decade, the US will need almost 430 terawatt hours of energy for data centers alone. The strain on the energy grid will be enormous. That's a very serious infrastructure problem. And let's not forget the raw energy costs as well. It's a reason why Trump is doing everything he can to bring the cost of oil down. There's no other alternative. Trying to short circuit decades of complacency won't be easy, and it definitely won't be cheap. Here's the problem with this: someone has to pay for this massive build out. US consumers are already getting taxed through the trade tariffs. They are suffering anywhere from 10 to 20% higher prices, maybe even more. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, people can consume less in Walmart, they can consume less in Target, they can always stop buying their favorite toys, electronics, and even food. Not a problem there. But there's one thing that people can't strip away. Unless you're willing to go back to the candles and work in the dark during the dark ages, you need electricity. And this is where things truly get ugly. US power prices have already risen by an insane amount. It's up by almost 20% since the last 5 years, and it's only going to get higher. Data centers and crypto mining could send prices higher by at least 8% by 2030. This is an additional strain on US consumers every single month, every single day. It's not just about the bond market breaking, it's not just about Nvidia's revenues crashing. Now US consumers are on a hook. They are paying for the AI war against China. Now, unless the build out of US energy can be done overnight instantly, prices would most definitely spike. It's basic supply and demand. And how will the federal government bridge the gap? Will they ramp up deficits to give subsidies or slam interest rates down even further to allow more borrowing of money? Well, someone has to lose because China is just so far ahead.
China has twice the amount of energy we have as a nation.
I want to ask about that.
Twice as much energy as we have as a nation, and our economy is larger than theirs. However, without energy, how do we build chip plants, computer system plants, and these AI data centers? We call them AI factories. We're building simultaneously 3 different types of factories in the United States: chip factories, supercomputer factories, and AI factories. They all require energy, every single one of them.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we want to reindustrialize the United States. How do you do that without energy?
The situation in the US is dire. Trump is at the poker table and he's betting the entire future of the US economy. He's trying to bluff the Chinese to fold their hand. But China's pot of money is all organic, while Trump's pot of cash is all borrowed money. And with that comes big consequences for Main Street. And let's put this simply: when you take money out of the economy, companies big and small, they are starved of credit. They can't access money to grow their business or even run their operations. And the pain is starting to show. US job cuts have hit the highest level in the last 4 years. Funny how this coincides with the tariffs and chip war with China. In November, another 71,000 jobs were lost in the US. In total, we have nearly 1.2 million jobs lost in the country. In the next 12 months, this could get far worse. The US will be channeling all their focus and money towards AI. So Main Street will continue to get hollowed out, which is simply tragic. All the focus is on building the matrix. So if you have a job on hand, it's probably not a good idea, not a good time to be greedy. Corporate revenues are going to get squeezed like never before. Real companies are not in expansion mode. They are simply treading water today. Now, we know the Fed is going to aggressively cut rates in 2026, but that does not mean real borrowing costs won't spike. Even US treasuries themselves will be facing a crisis next year. BlackRock has turned bearish on long-term government bonds. The AI funding wave is going to sweep across the country like never before, and it's not difficult to understand why. AI companies, even hyperscalers, have to borrow a ton of money. And when they borrow, it will be for 5 to 10 years at minimum. That's essentially a long term bond which directly competes with Scott Bessent's debt issuance. So now the 10-year treasury faces more competition. Bond yields have to go up to lure in the investors. And now all borrowing costs goes up the board as well. Industrial companies borrowing money, mom and pop stores taking a loan, everyone is going to get hammered in the bond markets. Companies could be borrowing at 8, 9, or even 10% in 2026. Now, the AI revolution, if you can call it that, needs a lot of money in a short amount of time. And according to BlackRock, the front loading of all this spending will hit 15% of total GDP growth. It's just behind IT spending decades back, but it tells us how intense the pain is going to be for US companies. It won't be pretty. This mess is extremely interconnected. AI companies will eventually face a funding squeeze. Even Nvidia will face a wall if China decides to turn their backs forever. Then even more debt will be needed to keep the game going. Now, for the wider economy, this will be very problematic. If things get nasty enough, companies will either lay off workers or they will cut salaries. Either way, it's not looking good. Americans out of work are in the danger zone. Job openings per unemployed US worker is now at 1.0. It used to be 2 openings, but the crunch is getting worse. Should a recession happen or the funding squeeze goes haywire, this number will go below 1. Then we could really get a big cascading effect that hammers down on everything. More unemployment means less spending. Less spending means a collapse in earnings, and that starts the flywheel of even greater layoffs. So if you're having a tough time today, it really isn't your fault. Unless you're in the tech or AI space, the game is rigged against you. And even if you are in the AI industry, it's not a guarantee that it's going to be rainbows and sunshine forever. China could always throw a curveball and essentially wreck this Jenga tower of debt. So, ladies and gentlemen, brace for impact here. But let me know what you think. Will China throw Trump a bone and buy Nvidia chips? And will AI funding collapse Main Street in the years to come? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.